In the dry winds of northern Sudan, where the desert cracked beneath bare feet and the sun sat heavy like a judgment, lived a girl named Halima. She was born beneath the stars in a hut made of straw and strength. To a mother who had never screamed and a grandmother who said pain made women worthy. In Halima's village, beauty was not in the eyes, it was in the body, carved by fire. Sealed in silence, Halima was 9 when she was called into the women's hut, the one no boys were allowed to enter, not even the fathers. Inside her, aunts sat in a circle, their faces stern, their hands busy with cloth and razor. Her grandmother Nyala, the matriarch, stood with the authority of generations behind her. There was no kindness in her eyes, only duty. Halima knew what was coming. Every girl did. They spoke of it in whispers, in stifled cries behind water pots. They called it tear purification. But what it was cutting. The ritual was centuries old. Female genital cutting, an act done in the name of modesty, culture, and cleanliness. They said it made girls marriageable, respectable, proud, but no one ever asked the girls. They just laid them down, held their legs open, and removed parts of their body parts made by God with a blade older than memory. Halima did not scream. That was her mother's legacy. But her tears fell onto the red earth, soaking it with secrets. After the cutting, they sewed her closed, leaving only a pinhole for urine. She was given milk, prayers, and silence. And when she asked why, they told her, "This is how we protect you from being wild. This is how you become a woman." The weeks that followed were agony. She could not walk without pain. She could not sleep without dreams of fire. Her body was foreign to her now, a battleground of culture and flesh. And yet she was told to smile. At the village festival she wore white, and they sang songs about her strength. She stood like a statue, bleeding beneath her clothes. Years passed. Halima grew into a beautiful young woman, her face carved with tribal marks that shimmered under the desert moon, but the wound inside her never healed. She could not urinate without pain. K periods were a curse of blood and blockage. And as marriage approached, fear gripped her like a vulture's claw. Her husband, Idris, was a quiet man, chosen by her family. On their wedding night, Halima was cut open again, this time by a midwife to prepare her for intercourse. Number, anesthesia, no comfort, just the cold blade and the prayers. The next morning, the women ululated in celebration. Halima bled into the sheets, her eyes open to the ceiling, wondering if God wept for women. But this was not just Halima's pain. It was her mother's too, her grandmother's, her neighbors. An unbroken chain of suffering passed from hand to hand like heirloom jewelry. And strangely, it was not the men who held the knives. It was the women, the aunts, the mothers, the grandmothers. Why? Because they believed. They believed that without it, their daughters would be shunned, that no man would marry an uncut girl, that the community would whisper, would mock, would curse them as whores. So they sacrificed their daughters on the altar of reputation, not out of hatred, but fear. And fear, Halima realized, could be more brutal than any man. Her friend Miriam tried to escape. Her father had read a pamphlet from a UN worker, warning about the dangers of cutting. He banned it for his daughters. But when Miriam turned 12, her own grandmother took her into the bush, away from the father's eyes, and had her cut in secret. When she returned, she could not stop bleeding. She died 3 days later. The village mourned. The grandmother wept. But no one was punished, because tradition does not go to prison. Halima began to dream of leaving, of walking past the dunes, past the borders, into a world where women's bodies were their own. She Heard of Khartoum, where some girls went to school, where some hospitals refused to perform the cut? But it was a faraway place, like a myth. Here, in her village, the wheel spun on. One day, a foreign woman arrived. A doctor from Kenya, dark-skinned like them, but with eyes that challenged everything. She spoke to the village elders, held meetings. With the women, she showed pictures of infected wounds, of girls dying from sepsis, of marriages ruined by trauma. She said, "This is not culture, this is cruelty." The elders scoffed. The men shrugged. But some women listened. Halima sat. In one of those meetings, her body still aching from her second childbirth, a child born through a scarred passage. She listened to the doctor speak of healing, of rights, of resistance. And something inside her, something long buried, began to stir. That night she confronted her grandmother. "Why did you let them cut me?" Nyala looked up from her. "Woven mat, because I love you. Because I had no choice, but you held my legs. I did what was done to me, what was done to your mother. That is how the world works." Halima shook her head. "Then let's change the world," it began. Slowly, a whisper. A meeting of 5 women beneath the acacia tree. Then 10, then 15. Some scoffed, some cursed, but others listened. They spoke of their pain, not in shame, but in defiance. They held each other as they cried. They shared stories never told. Aloud, of wedding nights that felt like rape, of childbirths that tore them in half. Of the silence that haunted them, they created a pact. No more cutting, not for their daughters. Not for their granddaughters. They signed it with ink and with blood, the blood of rebellion, but the village fought back. Rumors spread. The imam condemned them in his sermon. Husbands threatened divorce. One woman was beaten. Another's house was burned. Halima was called a traitor, a Western puppet. But she stood firm. She traveled to Khartoum, trained as a midwife. She returned with tools, not for cutting, but for healing. She opened a small clinic with the doctor's help. At first, no one came. Then a girl arrived one night, limping, crying, bleeding. Halima stitched her, held her, sang to her. The next week, another came. Then another. Years passed. Halima became a name, a symbol. Some still hated her, but others began to respect her. Her daughter, Asha, turned 9 and remained uncut. She ran through the village barefoot, wild and free. Laughter a rebellion in itself. One evening, Nyala sat outside the hut, watching the sun melt into the dunes. Her hands trembled with age. Halima sat beside her. "You were brave, Nyala," whispered. Halima smiled. "I was angry." "They are not so different." Nyala nodded slowly. "Forgive me." Halima took her grandmother's hand. "I already did." That night the stars blinked above them. The same stars that had witnessed generations of pain. But now they saw something new. A crack in the system, a flame in the dark. A woman who dared to love her body enough to fight for it. And in that moment, the silence began to break.